Saturday afternoon at Westfield Shopping Center was always chaotic, but today the usual weekend bustle felt particularly intense. Families streamed through the wide corridors beneath gleaming chandeliers, their footsteps echoing off polished marble floors as they moved between stores decorated with end-of-season sales banners. Jack Miller guided his 8-year-old son Tommy through the crowd with practiced ease, one hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder, while the other clutched a short shopping list. At 35, Jack had the lean build of someone who worked with his hands and the careful, observant eyes of a single parent who had learned to anticipate problems before they became crises. "Dad, can we go to the toy store after we get my new sneakers?" Tommy asked, looking up with the hopeful expression that always made Jack's heart tighten with love and worry in equal measure. "We'll see." "Buddy," Jack replied, automatically checking his watch and calculating the time against Tommy's medication schedule. "Remember, we need to get home before dinner so you can take your evening inhaler." Tommy nodded seriously. At 8, he was already more aware of his asthma management than most adults. A responsibility that no child should have to carry, but that had become second nature after years of living with the condition. They were walking past the central food court when a sound cut through the ambient noise of the mall. A sound that made Jack's blood freeze and his parental instincts snap to immediate alert. A child was struggling to breathe. Across the walkway, near the entrance to an upscale department store, a small crowd was beginning to form around what appeared to be a man and a little girl. Jack could hear the distinctive wheeze and gasp that he knew too well, the terrifying sound of someone whose airways were closing. "Stay right here," Jack told Tommy firmly, positioning his son against a nearby pillar. "Don't move." Jack pushed through the gathering onlookers toward the center of the commotion. A 7-year-old girl with long dark hair sat on the floor, her back against a bench, her small chest heaving as she fought for each breath. Her lips had a blue tinge that sent alarm bells ringing in Jack's head, and her eyes were wide with the unmistakable panic of someone who couldn't get enough air. Kneeling beside her was a man in an expensive gray suit, his face pale with terror as he tried to comfort his daughter while clearly having no idea what to do. His hands shook as he patted her back ineffectively, his voice breaking as he spoke. "It's okay, Emma. Just try to breathe slowly. Daddy's here. Someone please help us." Robert Hayes, though Jack didn't know his name yet, was one of the most successful CEOs in the city, a man accustomed to handling million-dollar crises with calm precision. But watching his daughter struggle to breathe had stripped away every bit of his professional competence, leaving him feeling helpless and desperate. "Has anyone called 911? Robert shouted to the crowd, his usual commanding presence reduced to raw parental fear. Jack didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and knelt on the other side of Emma, his voice calm but authoritative. "I know how to handle this. Trust me." Without waiting for permission, Jack reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small blue inhaler, the same type he always carried for Tommy's emergency situations. He learned years ago to keep backups everywhere. Car, office, pocket, because when a child can't breathe, seconds matter. "Emma, can you look at me?" Jack said gently, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who had talked a child through countless asthma attacks. "I'm Jack, and I'm going to help you breathe better, okay?" Emma's panicked eyes locked onto his face as Jack carefully positioned the inhaler. "I want you to try to breathe out first. Then we're going to take a slow, deep breath with this medicine. Can you do that for me?" Robert watched in stunned silence as this stranger, this man in worn jeans and a simple button-down shirt, took control of the situation with a competence that Robert himself completely lacked. Within minutes, Emma's breathing began to ease, the blue tinge fading from her lips as the medication opened her airways. "That's it, sweetheart," Jack murmured, monitoring Emma's response carefully. "You're doing great. Just keep breathing, nice and slow." As Emma's breathing returned to normal and the immediate crisis passed, Robert found himself staring at Jack with an expression of profound gratitude mixed with something like awe. This ordinary-looking man had just saved his daughter's life with a skill and calm that Robert, despite all his success and resources, didn't possess. "How did you know what to do?" Robert asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Jack smiled gently, still keeping one eye on Emma to make sure she remained stable. "My son has asthma. You learned to be prepared." "Where are you watching this video right now? At home, at work, or during your rest time? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing from each and every one of you. 3 years earlier, Jack Miller's life had been completely different. He'd worked as a systems administrator for a mid-sized tech company, shared parenting duties with his wife Sarah, and lived in a comfortable suburban home where the biggest worry was whether Tommy would make the soccer team or need extra help with his math homework. Sarah's death had come without warning, a brain aneurysm that struck while she was driving home from her job as a nurse at the Children's Hospital. The accident that followed claimed her life instantly, leaving Jack to navigate single parenthood while drowning in grief and facing financial realities he'd never had to consider. The life insurance helped with immediate expenses, but it became clear quickly that Jack's income alone wouldn't sustain their previous lifestyle. The suburban house went up for sale, and Jack and Tommy moved to a modest apartment in a working-class neighborhood where rent was affordable, but dreams felt distant. More challenging than the financial adjustment was Tommy's health crisis. The stress of losing his mother had triggered a severe worsening of asthma symptoms that had previously been mild and easily managed. What had once been occasional wheezing during cold season became a life-threatening condition that required constant vigilance, expensive medications, and frequent emergency room visits. Jack lost his corporate job 6 months after Sarah's death, when Tommy's medical needs required him to miss too many days of work. The company's HR department was sympathetic but practical. They needed someone who could be reliably present, and Jack's new reality as a single parent to a chronically ill child made that impossible. Desperate for work that offered flexibility, Jack started his own computer repair business, operating out of their apartment and taking service calls that allowed him to work around Tommy's schedule. The income was unpredictable. Some months brought enough to cover their basic needs, others left them choosing between rent and Tommy's medications. But Jack discovered that desperation could be an excellent teacher. Faced with Tommy's frequent asthma attacks and limited resources for medical care, Jack became a student of everything related to respiratory management. He read medical journals at the public library, watched YouTube videos made by respiratory therapists, and connected with online communities of parents managing childhood asthma. "Dad, why do I have to use the peak flow meter every morning?" Tommy asked one day as Jack recorded his daily lung function readings in a notebook. "Because knowledge is power, buddy," Jack explained, showing Tommy the chart where they tracked his breathing patterns. "When we understand what's normal for you, we can catch problems before they become emergencies." Jack learned to recognize the subtle signs that preceded Tommy's attacks: the slight change in his cough, the way he cleared his throat more frequently, the barely perceptible shift in his breathing rhythm. He memorized the side effects of every medication, researched air quality indexes, and developed action plans for different severity levels of respiratory distress. Their apartment became a carefully controlled environment. Jack invested in air purifiers he couldn't really afford, eliminated every possible allergen, and maintained humidity levels with scientific precision. He carried backup inhalers everywhere and had established relationships with 3 different pharmacies to ensure they never ran out of medications. Most importantly, Jack learned to stay calm during crises. The first time Tommy had a severe attack after Sarah's death, Jack had panicked, his own breathing becoming labored as he watched his son struggle. But he quickly realized that his fear only made Tommy's panic worse. When you can't breathe, the scariest thing is seeing the people who are supposed to help you falling apart, Jack told his neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez after she'd witnessed him calmly managing one of Tommy's episodes. "Tommy needs to see that I'm in control, even when I'm terrified inside." Meanwhile, Robert Hayes was living a very different kind of struggle. As CEO of Hayes Industries, a construction and development company worth over $200 million, Robert had built his professional life on preparation, contingency planning, and maintaining control of complex situations. But Emma's recent asthma diagnosis had revealed a vulnerability that no amount of wealth or business acumen could address. Despite access to the best pediatric specialists in the city, despite a nanny trained in basic first aid, despite air purification systems in every room of their mansion, Robert felt helplessly unprepared for the unpredictability of his daughter's condition. Emma's asthma had developed suddenly, triggered by what doctors suspected was a combination of environmental factors and stress following her mother's death from cancer 2 years earlier. Unlike Tommy's gradually worsening condition, Emma's attacks came without warning and seemed to resist the standard treatment protocols. Robert threw money at the problem the way he approached business challenges, hiring the most expensive specialists, purchasing the most advanced monitoring equipment, even having their home's air system redesigned by environmental engineers. But money couldn't buy the kind of practical experience that came from years of daily management. The day at the mall had been Emma's worst attack yet, occurring in a public place where Robert had no access to their usual support systems. Watching his daughter struggle to breathe while feeling completely helpless had shattered Robert's confidence in ways that no business setback ever could. As he watched Jack's calm competence save Emma's life, Robert realized that all his resources meant nothing without the knowledge and experience that this single father had acquired through necessity and dedication. In the days following the mall incident, Robert Hayes found himself unable to concentrate on the quarterly board meetings and acquisition discussions that normally commanded his complete attention. The image of Jack Miller kneeling beside Emma, calmly talking her through the breathing techniques that Robert himself didn't know, replayed in his mind with vivid clarity. Robert had exchanged contact information with Jack that day, ostensibly to follow up on Emma's condition and express his gratitude properly. But what began as a courtesy call evolved into something deeper when Robert realized that Jack possessed exactly the kind of practical knowledge that no amount of money could purchase. "How did you know to carry that inhaler?" Robert asked during their first phone conversation. Emma's doctor said her specific medication wouldn't work for other children. "It wasn't Emma's specific medication," Jack explained patiently. "It was albuterol, a rescue inhaler that works for most asthma attacks. I always carry one because Tommy's attacks can be triggered by unexpected things when we're out. You learn to prepare for variables you can't control." Robert found himself taking notes during their conversation, writing down terms like peak flow monitoring and environmental triggers, with the same focus he usually reserved for market analysis. "Jack," Robert said finally, "would you be willing to teach me what you know? I can pay you for your time." There was a long pause before Jack responded. "Mr. Hayes, you don't need to pay me to help you take care of your daughter. But if you really want to learn, I'd be happy to share what I've figured out over the years." What followed was an education that no medical school curriculum could have provided. Jack showed Robert how to recognize the early warning signs that preceded Emma's attacks, taught him breathing exercises that could help during mild episodes, and explained the practical logistics of managing childhood asthma in real-world situations. "The key is preparation without paranoia," Jack explained as they sat in a coffee shop, while Tommy and Emma played nearby, both children using their inhalers with casual competence. "You want to be ready for anything, but you don't want your child to feel like they're living in a medical bubble." Robert watched how naturally Jack monitored Tommy's breathing and activity level without making the boy feel scrutinized or limited. It was a delicate balance that Robert was still learning to achieve with Emma. The shopping center's security team, who had responded to the emergency call that day, began spreading word about the incident among their network of mall employees. The story of the single father who had saved the CEO's daughter with quick thinking and a pocket inhaler became the kind of uplifting narrative that people shared during lunch breaks and coffee runs. "Did you hear about that guy who helped the little girl with the asthma attack?" Maria, who worked at the customer service desk, asked her colleague. "Turns out he's been managing his own son's condition for years, just stepped right in and knew exactly what to do." The story reached Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a pediatric pulmonologist who maintained a clinic in the medical building adjacent to the shopping center. Intrigued by the description of Jack's intervention, she asked to meet him during one of Tommy's routine appointments. "Mr. Miller," Dr. Walsh said after reviewing Tommy's carefully maintained medical records, "I have to say, your son's asthma management is exceptional. His lung function data shows remarkable stability for a child with his severity level." "Thank you," Jack replied, "but I can't take all the credit. Tommy's pretty good about following his routines." Dr. Walsh shook her head. "Mr. Miller, I've been treating childhood asthma for 15 years. The level of education and preparation you've achieved through self-study exceeds what many of my colleagues understand about practical management. Have you ever considered working in respiratory education?" The question caught Jack off guard. "I'm not medically trained. I just learned what I needed to learn to keep Tommy safe." Sometimes the most valuable teachers are the ones who've learned through necessity rather than textbooks, Dr. Walsh replied. The parent perspective is something we desperately need in professional asthma education programs. Word of Jack's knowledge and calm competence began to spread through the network of parents who frequented the medical complex. Mothers and fathers dealing with their own children's respiratory issues started seeking him out, asking for advice about everything from medication timing to environmental modifications. Jack helped us understand why our daughter's asthma was worse at night, shared Linda Chen, whose family had met Jack through the informal parent network. He suggested checking our bedroom air filtration and adjusting our humidity levels. It made a bigger difference than anything the doctors had tried. Robert, meanwhile, had begun telling colleagues about his experience, not just as a grateful father, but as a businessman who recognized exceptional talent when he saw it. This man has developed expertise that our company's entire safety department could learn from, Robert told his head of human resources during their weekly meeting. He's self-taught, practical, and has real-world experience managing crisis situations. Are you thinking about offering him a position? Asked Jennifer Park, who oversaw corporate training programs. I'm thinking about asking him to revolutionize how we approach workplace safety training, Robert replied. But first, I need to figure out how to approach someone who turned down my offer to help purely out of gratitude. The challenge Robert faced was that Jack had made it clear he wasn't interested in charity or opportunities based on sympathy. But what Robert was beginning to understand was that Jack's knowledge and experience represented something far more valuable than a gesture of thanks. It was a resource that could genuinely benefit others. 2 weeks after the mall incident, Robert Hayes made a decision that his executive team would later describe as typical Robert, bold, direct, and aimed at solving problems through decisive action. He arranged to meet Jack at an upscale restaurant downtown, claiming he wanted to properly thank Jack for saving Emma's life. But Robert's real intention was to present an offer that he believed Jack couldn't refuse, a position as Director of Workplace Safety for Hayes Industries, with a salary that would triple Jack's current income from computer repair work. Jack, Robert began over appetizers that cost more than Jack typically spent on groceries in a week. I've been thinking about our conversation regarding asthma management and emergency preparedness. I'd like to offer you a position with my company. Jack set down his fork, immediately sensing that this dinner was about more than gratitude. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not looking for a career change. Hear me out, Robert continued, pulling out a folder containing a formal job offer. Hayes Industries employs over 800 people across multiple construction sites and office locations. We need someone with your knowledge and calm under pressure to oversee our safety training programs. Jack scanned the offer letter, his eyebrows rising at the salary figure. It was more money than he'd made in his best year as a systems administrator, with benefits that would solve every financial worry he and Tommy faced. This is very generous, Jack said carefully, but I have to ask, are you offering me this job because I helped Emma, or because you genuinely believe I'm qualified for it? Robert paused, recognizing the trap in the question. Both, honestly. What I witnessed that day showed me that you have skills we need, but you're right that I probably wouldn't have known about those skills if not for the circumstances. Jack closed the folder and slid it back across the table. Mr. Hayes, I'm grateful for your offer, but I have to decline. May I ask why? The salary alone would solve the financial pressures you mentioned during our conversations about Tommy's medical expenses. Jack was quiet for a moment, watching through the restaurant's windows as ordinary people walked past on the sidewalk, going about their lives without the weight of exceptional expectations or obligations. Because I don't want to be anyone's charity case, Jack said finally, and I don't want Tommy growing up thinking that his father succeeded because someone felt sorry for us. This isn't charity, Jack. This is recognition of your abilities. Is it? Jack asked gently. If I were to walk into your office tomorrow as a stranger, with my background as a computer repair technician and no formal safety training, would you seriously consider me for a director-level position? Robert's silence provided the answer. I thought so, Jack continued. Mr. Hayes, what I did for Emma wasn't extraordinary. Any parent who's dealt with childhood asthma for years would have known how to help. I don't deserve a high-paying corporate position because I happen to be prepared for an emergency. But that's exactly the kind of preparedness we need in our safety programs. Jack shook his head. What you need is someone with actual credentials and experience in workplace safety, not a single dad who's good in a crisis. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need to earn my success through my own merit, not through someone's gratitude. Robert felt frustrated and genuinely confused. In his business experience, people who needed money and were offered good opportunities took them. Jack's refusal seemed to go against every rational calculation. Jack, you're being impractical. This could change your entire life trajectory. Tommy's medical expenses alone would justify accepting this position. Mr. Hayes, Jack said, standing up from the table, my life trajectory is fine the way it is. Tommy and I have what we need. We're not wealthy, but we're not desperate either. I fix computers, I take care of my son, and I help other parents when I can. That's enough for me. As Jack prepared to leave, Robert made one last attempt. What if I could prove to you that this offer is based on merit rather than gratitude? What would it take to convince you that your skills are genuinely valuable to my company? Jack paused at the question, considering it seriously. Mr. Hayes, if you want to prove that my knowledge has value, then let me share it freely with people who need it. Don't put me on your payroll as a favor. Let me teach what I've learned to other parents, other families dealing with childhood asthma. If what I know is really valuable, it should benefit everyone, not just your employees. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that if you really want to honor what happened that day with Emma, you support community education about childhood asthma management. Help parents learn what they need to know to keep their kids safe. That would mean more to me than any job offer. As Jack walked away from the restaurant, Robert sat alone with his untouched dinner, realizing that he had completely misjudged what would motivate this remarkable man. Jack wasn't interested in climbing corporate ladders or improving his financial status. He was interested in making sure other children like Tommy and Emma had parents who knew how to keep them safe. For the first time in his business career, Robert Hayes had encountered someone whose values couldn't be purchased or influenced by traditional incentives. And surprisingly, that realization filled him with respect rather than frustration. 3 months after their unsuccessful dinner meeting, Robert Hayes called Jack with a proposition that was completely different from his original job offer. Jack, I've been thinking about what you said regarding community education, Robert began. What if we organized a public workshop on childhood asthma management? Something free for parents, taught by someone with real experience. Jack was immediately interested but cautious. What kind of workshop? I'm thinking we could use the conference center at Hayes Industries. Invite families from across the city. You could share what you've learned about practical asthma management, emergency response, daily monitoring, all the things you've mastered with Tommy. And what would you get out of this? Jack asked, still skeptical of Robert's motivations. Honestly, I'd get to watch you teach other parents what you taught me. Emma hasn't had a serious attack since I started following your guidance. I think every parent dealing with childhood asthma deserves access to that knowledge. The workshop was scheduled for a Saturday morning in November, advertised through pediatric clinics, online parent groups, and community centers. Robert had expected maybe 30 or 40 families to attend, but by the morning of the event, over 150 parents and children had registered. The Hayes Industries Conference Center had been transformed into a welcoming space with round tables, comfortable seating, and demonstration areas where Jack could show proper inhaler techniques and peak flow monitoring. Dr. Walsh had agreed to attend as a medical consultant, and several local respiratory therapists volunteered to help with hands-on instruction. But as Jack stood at the front of the room, looking out at dozens of families who had come seeking the same knowledge he'd had to acquire through trial and error, he felt a nervousness he hadn't experienced since Emma's emergency at the mall. "Good morning," he began, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had impressed Robert months earlier. "My name is Jack Miller, and I'm here because my son Tommy has severe asthma. 3 years ago, I knew almost nothing about managing this condition. Today, I'd like to share what I've learned, not as a medical professional, but as a parent who's been where you are." What followed was the most practical, accessible, and emotionally resonant presentation on childhood asthma management that most of the attendees had ever experienced. Jack spoke about the fear that every parent feels during their child's first serious attack, the overwhelming nature of medical terminology and treatment protocols, and the way that asthma management becomes a family lifestyle rather than just a medical routine. "The goal isn't to cure asthma," Jack explained as he demonstrated proper spacer technique with a volunteer. The goal is to make asthma a manageable part of your child's life rather than something that controls their life. He talked about creating asthma action plans that children could understand and follow, about recognizing environmental triggers that doctors might not think to ask about, and about the importance of teaching children to advocate for themselves as they got older. Tommy carries his own rescue inhaler now, Jack said, gesturing to his son, who was helping distribute materials to other children. He knows when he needs to use it, and he's not afraid to speak up if he's having trouble breathing. That confidence didn't happen overnight. It took years of practice and patience. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Jack addressed the emotional toll that childhood asthma takes on entire families. "You're going to feel guilty," he said, looking directly at parents throughout the room. "You're going to wonder if you're doing something wrong, if you're not careful enough, if you're overprotective or not protective enough. I want you to know that those feelings are normal, but they're not helpful." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "Your child needs you to be calm, informed, and confident. They need to see that asthma is something you can handle together. If you fall apart every time they wheeze, they'll learn to be afraid of their own breathing." A mother in the third row raised her hand. "How do you stay calm when your child can't breathe? My daughter had an attack last month, and I completely panicked." Jack nodded with understanding. "I panicked too during my son's first serious attack after my wife died. But I realized that my panic was making Tommy's attack worse. Children pick up on our fear, and fear makes breathing problems worse." He demonstrated the breathing techniques he'd learned to teach Tommy, showing parents how to guide their children through controlled breathing exercises that could help prevent panic from escalating minor episodes into major crises. "The key is practice when they're feeling fine," Jack explained. "We practice these breathing exercises every morning when Tommy's lungs are clear and he's not stressed. That way, when he does have trouble breathing, the techniques feel familiar and comforting rather than scary and new." As the workshop continued, Robert watched from the back of the room, amazed by Jack's natural teaching ability and the way parents responded to his combination of practical knowledge and emotional understanding. This wasn't just asthma education. It was parent-to-parent support delivered by someone who had earned his expertise through years of dedicated learning and experience. During the break, Dr. Walsh approached Robert with obvious excitement. "Robert, this is extraordinary. Jack is covering practical management techniques that most of my medical residents don't understand. He's translating complex medical concepts into actionable guidance that parents can actually use." "I told you he was remarkable," Robert replied, watching Jack patiently answer individual questions from parents who had approached him with their specific concerns. "More than remarkable. This kind of education could revolutionize how we support families dealing with childhood asthma. Have you considered developing this into an ongoing program?" When the workshop concluded 4 hours later, parents approached Jack with business cards, contact information, and requests for follow-up sessions. Several asked if he would be willing to speak at their children's schools or local parent groups. As the last families left and Jack was packing up his demonstration materials, Robert approached him with a new kind of offer. "Jack, that was incredible. I've never seen anything like the response you got from those parents." "It felt good to share what I've learned," Jack admitted. "I just wish I'd had access to this kind of information when Tommy was first diagnosed." "That's exactly why I want to propose something," Robert said. "Not a job offer this time, but a partnership. What if we created a permanent community education program? The Jack Miller Asthma Family Education Initiative, with funding from Hayes Industries but run entirely according to your vision." Jack looked up from the materials he was organizing, genuine interest replacing his usual wariness. "Tell me more about what you're thinking. How do you feel knowing the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Heroine so you never miss incredible stories like this one." 1 year later, the Jack Miller Family Asthma Education Center occupied a bright, welcoming space in the renovated wing of the Children's Medical Complex downtown. What had begun as a single workshop had evolved into a comprehensive program that served over 2,000 families annually through classes, support groups, and one-on-one consultations. Jack arrived each morning to an office that felt more like a comfortable living room than a medical facility. The walls were decorated with thank you letters from families, photos from group events, and charts showing the dramatic reduction in emergency room visits among program participants. Dad, Mrs. Patterson says the new families are here for orientation, Tommy announced, sticking his head into Jack's office with the casual familiarity of a child who had grown up in the center. Now 9 years old and managing his asthma with impressive independence, Tommy had become an unofficial ambassador for the program, often helping newer children feel comfortable with their inhalers and breathing exercises. Thanks, buddy. Tell them I'll be right there. The new family orientation had become Jack's favorite part of the program. He never forgot the terror and helplessness he'd felt during Tommy's early attacks, and he saw those same emotions in every parent who walked through the center's doors for the first time. Today's group included 6 families, their children ranging in age from 3 to 14. Jack could read the mix of hope and skepticism in the parents' faces. They'd tried medical treatments and followed doctors' orders, but they were still living in fear of the next emergency. Welcome to the family, Jack began, using the greeting that had become the center's signature. That's not just a figure of speech. By the time you complete our program, you'll be part of a community of families who understand exactly what you're going through. Among the families was Robert Hayes, attending not as a donor or board member, but as a parent bringing his friend's newly diagnosed 8-year-old son to learn the techniques that had transformed Emma's life. Emma herself, now 10 and a confident young advocate for asthma awareness, was helping in the children's demonstration area, showing younger kids how to use spacers and peak flow meters with the patience she'd learned from watching Jack teach. Mr. Jack saved my life, Emma explained to a shy 6-year-old who was reluctant to try his inhaler. And he taught my daddy how to help me stay safe. Now I can do everything other kids do. I just have to be smart about it. The transformation in Robert had been as dramatic as the one in his daughter. The CEO, who had once felt helpless watching Emma struggle to breathe, now served on the boards of 3 asthma research organizations and had made Hayes Industries a model for workplace respiratory safety. Jack, Robert said as they watched their children work together during the afternoon's peer support session, do you ever regret not taking that corporate position I offered? Jack smiled, observing Tommy explain breathing techniques to a teenager who was newly diagnosed and embarrassed about needing an inhaler at school. Not for a second. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. The center had expanded beyond asthma education to include programs for other childhood chronic conditions, always maintaining Jack's philosophy that parent-to-parent support was as important as medical knowledge. Families traveled from 3 states away to participate in residential programs, and Jack's training methods were being implemented in children's hospitals across the country. But perhaps the most meaningful success was the simplest one. Children like Tommy and Emma were growing up seeing their asthma as a manageable part of their lives, rather than a limitation on their dreams. Dad, Tommy said as they walked to their car after the evening's family support group, do you think Mom would be proud of what we built here? Jack stopped walking, struck by the question and the mature way his son had phrased it, what we built rather than what you built. I think she'd be amazed that her son grew up to be so brave and kind, Jack replied, and I think she'd love knowing that you're helping other kids the way she used to help her patients. As they drove home through the city where Jack had once felt overwhelmed and alone, he reflected on how completely their lives had changed since that day at the mall when Emma couldn't breathe. One brave action had saved a child's life, but the courage to share what he'd learned had created something much larger, a community where no parent had to face childhood asthma alone. A brave action can save one child's life, and a kind heart can save an entire community. If you believe that kindness and determination always create miracles, please subscribe to Hidden Heroine. Let's spread these heartwarming stories together.